You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. Chapter 59. Su Chu fights Ma Chao. Cao Cao sows distrust between Ma Chao and Han Sui. It is inconclusive, and by morning both sides have had enough and withdraw. Despite various plans and strategies of Cao Cao, in the end Ma Chao's men take control of the mouth of the river Wei, and Chao has to think defensively. He tries to have walls built, but the mud is too wet and they collapse. Then one night an old Taoist sage visits him, and tells him to take note of the change in the weather. A bitingly cold wind is about to sweep down upon them, and this will mean that if they build the walls, and wet them, then the bitter cold will freeze them as solid as blocks of ice, and make the walls firm. When Ma Chao sees what has happened, he begins to wonder if Cao Cao has gained the support of the deities. The next day he advances upon Cao Cao, and this swiftly turns into a personal challenge. Ma Chao can see that beside Cao Cao there is a mighty warrior whom he is sure is Su Chu, known also as Lord Tiger. When challenged, Su Chu shouts back that it is indeed him, and the next day he sends a challenge back to Ma Chao for a 1-to-1 fight. The ensuing struggle is a titanic one. Both men attack, and the first bout lasts 100 rounds with neither man coming out on top. The second bout also goes to 100 rounds, but again with no conclusion. The third bout ends with the two men struggling to batter each other to death with two pieces of a broken spear with which Ma Chao has nearly pierced Su Chu. He grabbed hold of the spear with his bare hands, and in the struggle the spear broke. Again, neither one triumphs, but both sides, fearing for their champion, surge forward, and battle ensues. It is Cao Cao who loses, and he is driven back into his fortified camp of the frozen walls. Another bout of sorties and counter-sorties a few days later results in Cao Cao being able to set up camp on the west bank, and thus being in a position to attack Ma Chao from two directions. As a result, a number of Ma Chao's officers, including Han Sui, urge him to ask for a truce through the winter. So emissaries are sent to Cao Cao, who tells them to return for his answer the next day. When Chao's advisor Jiasu comes to discuss this with him, he suggests that they use this period of truce to sow discord between Ma Chao and Han Sui. When the emissaries return, Cao Cao agrees to the truce, and makes it appear in the next few days as if he is pulling back. Not trusting Cao Cao, Ma Chao comes up with his own strategy for trying to keep an eye on what is really happening. He decides that he and Han Sui will take it in turns, day in day out, to face the different sections of Chao's army. One day Han Sui will observe Chao's fortifications, and Ma Chao those of Su Huang on the west bank, and then vice versa. This gives Cao Cao the opportunity for deception that he was hoping for. One day, when Han Sui is opposite him, he rides out. He shouts out, "You know I'm Cao Cao. I'm just an ordinary human being, not some terrible demon with 4 eyes or many mouths." Then he sends a message to Han Sui, saying that he wants to meet him and talk. So Han Sui too rides out, and together, with no one else there, the two men talk of times past, of their families, and of growing old. It is harmless chatter, but Cao Cao makes a point of often laughing out loud. The talk goes on for a couple of hours, and then each man rides back to his own lines. Of course, Ma Chao hears about this and, deeply suspicious, asks Han Sui what is going on. Han Sui tries to reassure him that it was harmless chatter about times past, but Ma Chao is very suspicious indeed. Back in Chao's camp, Jiasu suggests how they could dramatically increase the tension between the two. Write a letter to Han Sui, but cross out some words, scratch out others and write over them. When Ma Chao hears about this letter from you, he'll demand to see it. He'll think that Han Sui made these changes, trying to hide the real message of the letter. That will sow distrust. This is exactly what happens. When the letter arrives, Ma Chao is, of course, informed and comes to see Han Sui, demanding to be given the letter. Observing the crossings out, and the scratchings out, and rewriting, he accuses Han Sui of plotting to betray him. Han Sui vigorously denies this. To show his loyalty, he suggests that he help trap Cao Cao so Ma Chao can kill him. He will go out to talk with Cao Cao, and, at a signal, Ma Chao will charge out and kill him. The next day Han Sui sends a message, asking Cao Cao to come over to continue the discussions. But before he comes himself, Cao Hong rides up, and in a loud stage whisper says to Han Sui, "The Prime Minister wants to reassure you after what you said last night that there will be no mistakes," and then he turns and rides back. Ma Chao overhears this, as he is meant to do, and in a fury rides out straight at Han Sui with his lance lowered. Others intervene and pull him away, while Han Sui professes his innocence. But Ma Chao rides off determined to have revenge. Realizing that things have moved from difficult to impossible, Han Sui decides to go over to Cao Cao because, as his friends point out, Ma Chao will never trust him again. So it is that Han Sui secretly enters Cao Cao's service, while still living in Ma Chao's camp. He also agrees with the other 5 officers, who have joined him in this betrayal, that they will attack Ma Chao on a given signal. However, Ma Chao already knows of their plot, and the secret deal, and with faithful men such as Pang De and Ma Dai he strides off to confront Han Sui. Quietly entering Han Sui's tent, he finds all the conspirators together. Roaring with anger, he launches himself at the men, cutting off Han Sui's hand when he raises it to protect himself. The fight spills out of the tent. Ma Chao cuts down 2 of the conspirators, while the other 3 flee. Returning to finish off Han Sui, he is thwarted because attendants have pulled Han Sui away to safety. Now Cao Cao's men rush to the attack, and chaos prevails, with discord among Ma Chao's own men as well as the attack by Cao Cao's troops. Realizing the dangers, Ma Chao takes up a defensive position to guard the Wei Bridge with a small troop of loyal men. Arrows rain down on him, and he survives, but despite brave attempts to charge forward, the sheer number of Chao's men forces him back. With no other option, Ma Chao turns and charges off to the north, leaving his men to their fate. But even this does not work, for a crossbow shot kills his horse, and the enemy troops close in for the kill. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, Pang De and Ma Dai thunder to the rescue, catching Chao's men off guard and scattering them. Soon they race off, with Ma Chao mounted now on another horse. Cao Cao gives orders that every possible effort is made to catch him, and offers a huge reward to whomsoever does that. Ma Chao rides like the devil, and soon only a handful of his men are still with him, Pang De and Ma Dai among them. They ride pell-mell to sanctuary in Lintao. Cao Cao rewards Han Sui and the surviving conspirators, and then returns with the army to Chang'an. Here, however, Yang Fu, one of the military advisors, strongly recommends that Ma Chao be dealt with before anything else takes place. Cao Cao agrees but points out how stretched he is, so Yang Fu is given the task of hunting down Ma Chao. Once he has left, Chao's commanders come to discuss the campaign with him. In particular, they want to know why he smiled when he heard of the reinforcements that came to Ma Chao's assistance. "Quite simple really," says Cao Cao. "When spread out, these tribal warrior groups are difficult to deal with, and doing so would take months of campaigning. But when they all congregate together, then we can deal with them with one blow." So the northern army returned to Xuchang, where the emperor himself honors them, and bestows upon Cao Cao special honors. From that day on, the fearsome reputation of Cao Cao grows and grows. News of what has happened spreads far and wide and reaches to the west to Guanzhong, where the governor, Zhang Lu, is deeply troubled. He is the grandson of Zhang Dao Ling, a Taoist master, who went to meditate on Mount Huming in the western riverlands of Shu. There, he wrote a book designed to fool the common folk into believing he had magical, even divine powers. The local people greatly respected him, and, after he died, his son Zhongheng continued his tradition. Those wishing to study the Tao had to donate 5 bushels of rice. This earned him the nickname Rice Thief. When Zhongheng died, Zhang Lu continued the tradition. Zhang Lu gave himself the title Supreme Ruler, while his followers were called Ghost Fighters. The headman was called Libationer, while those in charge of large forces were called Lead Healing Libationer. True sincerity was the core of this tradition. Neither lying nor deception was permitted. If someone fell ill, an altar was created, and the sick person was brought to the place of silence, where they could reflect upon their sins which had caused this illness. Once this was articulated, prayers could be offered and overseen by the superintendent of libations. The prayers accompanied the written confession of the individual and 3 copies were made, entitled the petition to the 3 officials. One was then put on top of a hill to reach heaven, one was buried in the ground to reach earth, and one was thrown into water to reach the officials of the underworld. After this, if the patient recovered, he or she donated 5 bushels of rice as a thanksgiving. Besides this, they also had public places where the poor could find free rice, meat and somewhere to cook. Everyone was allowed to take this for their honest needs, but any excess, it was believed, would bring down punishment from heaven. Those who offended were given 3 pardons, and after that they were punished. They had no officials, because everyone was governed by the libationers. In this way Guanzhong has been ruled for 30 years, and has survived, because they are too far away from the imperial court for anyone to particularly worry about them. Instead, the court simply gave Zhang Lu an imperial title of prefect, and insisted that he send in the tax as usual. On hearing that Cao Cao has triumphed over the Western army, and is beginning to throw his weight around, Zhang Lu calls together his advisors. With Ma Ting murdered and Ma Chao in retreat, it's inevitable that Cao Cao will next come after us. To preempt this, I'm going to announce that I'm now the Prince of Hanning, and head the resistance. What do you think? His advisor Yen Pu replies, the people of this region number more than 100,000 households. There's considerable wealth and more than enough grain. We're protected on 4 sides by natural defenses. The defeat of Ma Chao has meant huge numbers of refugees have flooded into our area. In my honest opinion, Lu Zhang, governor of Izhou, is a weak man. So I suggest we seize the 41 departments of the Western Riverlands, and from there declare independence. Pleased with what he hears, Zhang Lu commissions his brother Zhang Wei to summon the army. It is not long before news of this uprising reaches the heartlands of Shu. The governor, Lu Zhang, is a longtime enemy of Zhang Lu, and has in fact executed both his mother and brother. Knowing that this makes Zhang Lu a danger, he garrisoned Baxi, a town close to Guanzhong, and appointed Pang Shi as the commander. It is Pang Shi who first hears of the uprising, and sends news to Lu Zhang. Deeply frightened, Lu Zhang assembles his advisors and asks what to do. In the midst of this a man stands up and says, "Don't you worry. I'm a man of few skills, but with this little tongue of mine I can make Zhang Lu so frightened that he'll not even look this way." So who is this man? Let's find out.